It feels like I'm going to do a mug shot here.
It is pretty bright, yeah.
Anyway. What are we talking about? We're talking about balanced.
Yeah. So what is it? Why would you want to use it? What's the advantage, pros, cons, etc.?
Balanced connections.
Yeah. So let's assume you don't know anything about it. You just got into high-end audio. You figured out there's a bunch of different connectors. Why would you use them? What do you want to buy? Say you wanted to buy a headphone. What connector do you buy? What amp do you want to plug it into? How do you interface with all the gear?
It's confusing.
Confusing, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you don't have that problem with standard speakers because there's not all these output.
Yeah, you hook them up and that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
Two
Speaker
wires,
wire.
four wires.
Yeah, right. 2 wires, maybe 4 leads if you got a bi-wired speaker.
Pretty simple. This is a little bit different.
Well, even then, though, the electronics on in the 2-channel world and speaker world are the same thing. You have balanced inputs, you have RCA inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
So you've got to learn how to navigate that. The headphones are a little simpler because a lot of times you get away with 1 or 2 pieces. You don't have so many to where speakers.
Makes it a little easier.
Well, I mean, you could do that with speakers too.
You could,
but
yeah.
But you do see a lot of people talking about balanced like it's the new amazing thing and you need to have it. But do you? Does it make a difference? What do you want balanced? Why do you use it? What's the difference?
These another question. Yeah, why?
So let's start with the input.
Tell us why.
Let's start with the input though, right? Because you got a source of some sort. You got probably a DAC or a transport, something producing audio, right? You need to get that into your amplifier, okay? So you have a cable connecting your DAC, we'll assume in this case, to your amplifier. Why would you use not balanced over balanced? What's the difference between the standard single-ended RCA, like your whites, reds, yellow connectors you've seen a million times, over the balanced XLR connector?
Well, like, a lot of people are probably familiar with RCA. It's been around forever. And it tends to be the more common connector type in audio. It's also the simplest. It's the center pin carries audio and the outer ring is ground. And that's it. So each channel you have audio carrying lead with ground on one single RCA connector. You plug it in, you have left, you plug another one in, you've got right channel. And if you have multi-channel, then you have more of those. They multiply.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's probably most things have RCA.
Most, yeah.
So it's probably the most universal.
It's rare not to have RCA.
Yeah.
That is an important note because a lot of times if something's balanced, it will have single-ended as well, usually. So it's usually more compatible. It's usually easier to find.
There is some gear that's designed specifically to run only balanced. Pro gear tends to be like that. There's no RCA connectors on most of the professional gear, like stuff you'd find in studios, and they just run everything balanced. They don't need single-ended. They don't even want to deal with it because for reasons that unbeknownst to this video.
It gets
mainly noise and hum, and they got when you
really
have
long runs.
Yeah, when you have hundreds and hundreds of feet of wire going in hundreds of different places, you need balanced. But in our home setting, it's not so critical.
Yeah, when the DAC is 2 feet away from the amp, it barely makes a difference most of the time. So the benefits to balanced in that and it's really minimal a lot of times.
Yeah, in most home systems. It's not to say there aren't benefits. And if it confuses you, don't worry about it because it confuses most people. But the benefits aren't really, the benefits are more about how the gear's designed, less about the connection.
Yeah.
So I would concentrate on that. If the manufacturer of the gear, let's say the headphone amp and a source or whatever you're running for gear, says, hey, or this stuff's really, really designed to run balanced inputs. It sounds better that way. Or people talk about they've tried both.
Yeah.
Assuming comparing apples to apples and they've used the same model and brand of cable, right? And they're not changing up different cables with different to compare it. Assuming that, some equipment does sound better using balanced connections versus RCA.
They usually will say.
Usually.
They'll tell you, we recommend running this
Even the owner's manuals, a lot of times they'll say. Yeah, right.
But it really comes down to the design, like so many things. You could design something that has almost no advantage between balanced and RCA. You could design something that's pretty much designed to be balanced, and in that case, you absolutely want to run it balanced if you can.
And I've heard both, right? Same with you. I've tried them, and some stuff matters.
Yeah.
More than others.
Yep. I know for a fact that the Mini, not the Mark II, big difference between the balanced and not balanced.
Yeah.
It was clearly designed to be balanced.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
So.
And same with like the Broadway, the 11 Audio Broadway, the smaller amp. It's fully balanced. It's a fully balanced internally amp. It's actually got 4 channels of amplification, 2 for left, 2 for right. So it needs balanced ins to go through and get out balanced.
Yeah, I guess that's an example of one of the unusual. It only has XLRs.
Yeah, there's no RCAs.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Now they could put circuitry in there to convert
Mhm.
an RCA to XLR internally, but then you're adding a conversion process
Mhm.
usually when you do that. So, and a lot of electronics does that in different ways. So, you know, sometimes when a piece is considered fully balanced internally, it's usually you're going to want to run it balanced into it too and through it to keep it. Let's just say to keep it simple, so that it keeps the format the same.
Yeah.
You know, if the internal topology or design of the amp is full balanced, which you'll usually know because it usually costs more, and usually they'll say it in the literature and so on. It'll be a feature.
Right.
It won't be something they hide, right? If it's fully balanced, then you're really almost always going to want to run it straight through balanced in and in probably out too.
As a safe bet, if something is designed to be balanced, if you know what gear you're using, absolutely, almost always you want to run it balanced in and out if you can. However, if you're looking to purchase new, you're wondering what the differences are, if you like a particular bit of gear and it isn't balanced, I would not let that deter you in any way. That probably
Yeah.
doesn't really make a
It's
big
not
difference.
critical.
Doesn't usually matter.
No.
But if you have balanced, use it. If you don't, it doesn't really make a big difference.
Right. And again, it can matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter either way. I mean, sometimes you could have a balanced input on an amp that's not balanced inside,
Right.
and it's worse. You know, that's unusual.
Yeah, that's less
Yeah,
common
yeah.
now.
That'd be
but yeah.
unusual. Yeah. So, and we're not trying to say that the default should be balanced. That you
No,
should
of
use
course
default.
not.
You can go either way.
Mhm.
It's just that some gear is just designed for that. So let's get back to explaining the difference in balanced between the gear, between the pieces of electronics versus the balanced output of, say, a headphone amplifier into a balanced cable
Mhm.
on the headphone itself. That's confusing too. And they're actually two separate things.
Right.
Running the electronics balanced, basically communicating between the source and whatever's in between it, a preamp or whatever, all the way down to the amplifier, those balance connections are different than the balanced output of a headphone amplifier.
Yep.
Mhm.
Entirely independent.
Even though they're both called balanced, and they are balanced electronically, they're balanced for different reasons. So we should probably try to at least simplify that.
Because you do see some headphones being marketed as a balanced headphone. That doesn't really mean anything. It's not like electronics. A lot of times it's a little misleading.
Yeah.
At least the way the consumer would read that, it doesn't really mean anything special. You could very easily have just a connector change, and it's driven just the same way, balanced or single-ended. Especially on most traditional design headphones, it makes no difference what connector you put on the headphone whatsoever.
Well, assuming that the headphone has at least two leads on each channel, 2 leads to the left, to the right.
Right.
You know, the cheap shit headphones, they have 3-pin, 3.5 millimeter.
with a single connector.
Yeah,
a
and there's
single
only
wire.
3 conductors there, so they
Yeah.
share a ground between the left and right. The left headphone earpiece and the left speaker and right speaker both share one wire going to the electronics,
Mhm.
and then they each have their separate left and right leads for left and right. So there's only 3 leads
Right.
for the entire headphone.
So it's not even possible for it to be
Can't
balanced.
balance that
Yeah.
headphone.
Well, you have to change the wire.
Yeah, well, yeah, if it's possible.
Yeah.
And on the cheaper stuff, that's not possible.
Well, you'd have to
you know?
modify it.
Or if the headphone only has one plug on one side,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that's a balanced headphone. It's probably just got 3 conductors, and it's got plus, minus, left, right, and ground. And that's it. Those
Yeah.
are the 3 wires. You can't balance that out. On the upper echelons, like what we do, every headphone can be balanced.
Pretty much.
If the cable's balanced.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, to have, yeah.
Because we have 2 leads here, and we have 2 leads here, and so each one can be fully independent of each other. They're not interconnected, and that's the big thing where people get confused. On a headphone side of things, where you're plugging into a headphone amplifier, right? The difference on a balanced cable, like this balanced connector here, where there's the typical higher power amplifier connector on a headphone amp will have a 4-pin connector. It's a balanced connector. It's got 2 pins for the left 2 pins for the right. They don't share any connection.
Yep.
That's what balanced means for a headphone cable. It's not the same as balanced ins and outs for the gear itself.
Very different design.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they
Yeah.
both have different benefits. But for a headphone, generally speaking, balance makes very, very little difference. The biggest impact you're going to see is, especially on portable gear like this, if it has both balanced and single-ended outputs, usually the balanced is the better option because the balance allows you to push more power depending on the design. So if you have a headphone that is very, very sensitive, it may not make a difference at all. And it actually may be better on single-ended in some cases.
Right, because usually more power means more noise too.
It can.
So
yeah.
on a very, very sensitive headphone or IEM, usually you don't want you might not want to go that option. But on a more demanding IEM,
Planar magnetics or less sensitive headphones,
they need the power.
usually on portable, power is your biggest limitation, and balanced almost always gives you considerably more power. But it's really not a connector thing, it's just a design thing. It's just the way the electronics work effectively. It's easier for them to make it more powerful on the balanced connector. We don't really need to get into the technical reasons, but there really is no electrical benefit for the most part for the actual connector. Whatever you have on your gear, it all works just the same. So if you're wondering what connector to get on your headphone, it really doesn't matter. You got to think about what you're going to plug it into. So you got to worry about compatibility. If you're going portable, there's a few standards. The new 4.4 millimeter Pentacon that Sony's trying to standardize, that's getting more common on high-end portable. But on the lower-end stuff, you still see the 3.5 millimeter, that's single-ended.
It's single-ended because it has 3 contacts.
Yeah.
Again, left, right,
Yep.
and ground. So ground is shared between them, and it's not. Therefore, it's not inherently balanced.
Right.
They call it single-ended.
But you could get great power, great signal out of a single-ended connector. It just really depends on the design, depends on what
the
you're
amp.
plugging it into.
Yeah.
But on top of that, on desktop, you very commonly see this 4-pole full-size XLR. That's being very common these days for balanced. And that is probably the more common recommended option for desktop.
desktops.
You're seeing a lot of it now on newer amps. Aside from that, you have the standard 1/8-inch 3.5 millimeter connector that you've seen on all headphones for a million years, and the full-size one, the 1/4-inch 3-pin, the single-ended one. That one is also somewhat common on desktop, but you can get an adapter to reduce it down, so kind of trade-offs there.
You've played with amps with different connectors too. Sometimes on the same amp, the sound could be different on different connectors, which is kind of what he was talking about. With
Yeah. I mean, most of
the
the time,
portable.
it's not really a big deal, but it just depends, again, on the design. So there's no way to know without trying it.
reading the owner's manual.
Well, yeah, they might say, yeah.
Ask the manufacturer.
But I think a thing we've been seeing more commonly now is people running Pentacons, just getting the cable terminated with Pentacons.
yeah.
So then they could use their high-end portable, like particularly with Diana's. And then when they get home, they could just use an adapter to a 4-pin.
Right.
So then you could use the same cable.
Yeah, because the Pentacon is actually a 5-pole connector. It's
So-
got plus minus for left right, and it's actually got a 5th ground lead, which some use, some don't. But it's a pretty multifaceted connector. It's
a great
very
connector.
universal, and
Yeah.
it's not as huge as an XLR, so it does lend itself. And a lot of the latest portable gear from most of the manufacturers, like the DAPs, the portable players, are all starting to come out with the 4.4 millimeter. You know, Estlin Kern was using the 2.5 millimeter
Yeah.
balanced, which has 4 conductors for a long time. And, that presented challenges trying to adapt that to
Yeah.
use as a source to plug into like an amp when you got home, because that 4-pin connector didn't have ground. So the beauty of the Pentacon is you have 4 pins plus ground, so that you could shield the cable, prevent noise, hum, things like that, and hook your portable up to a desktop unit when you get home and use your portable just like you were being portable, which is cool. I mean, if you spend a few grand on a portable,
Well, yeah.
right, it would make sense to, when you get home, to be able to use it as a source. It's got all your music on it, it's ready to go, and all you need is an adapter cable to go to your headphone amp, and you could power up. So.
And it's more durable than the 2.5, the 4.4.
Well, sure, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
2.5 is a tiny connector.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to break. The jacks are easier to break. So
Mm-hmm.
all around, I think Sony did a bang-up job at coming out with this 4.4 millimeter. That's for sure. It's a good connector.
It's definitely gaining traction now.
And of course, since we make cables for our headphones, we have to stock all these connectors.
Well, yeah.
So, as Abyss has, obviously, if you look when you go to order one of the Dianas or even the 1260, the 1266, we kind of, I don't even know if we do 2.5 millimeter. I'm not sure.
We might have done
can,
one,
maybe.
I think.
Yeah.
Once.
Usually, you're not going to power that off a small portable.
Yeah.
But on the Diana series, it comes with just about any available connector and various length cables too. So, that's the type of thing where choosing the connector type on the headphone, like you said, Eric, was basically dependent on the gear you're running.
Right.
What are you going to run it off of? Look at what output jacks does that amp have that's recommended to use, and you're usually going to shoot with our stuff. You're going to shoot for the highest powered output jack if there's a variation.
So usually balanced.
Usually the balance, like a 4-pin
Yeah.
or 4.4, some sort of balanced connection is usually what you're shooting for with our stuff to maximize power. And then choose the cable appropriately for length
Mhm.
with that connector to fit the piece you're doing. And of course, you could always email us or call us if you don't know. It's pretty basic to answer questions like that. So,
Some of it can be confusing, but for the most part, if you're portable, you probably do want to be balanced. Not because it's balanced, but because usually the amps are designed around that
Mhm.
and they're better balanced. But desktop really doesn't make a big difference. So if you know what amp you like, if you know what sound you're looking for, and you find it in an amp, I wouldn't worry whether or not it has
No,
balance.
it's not critical.
That's not important. The important thing is it's the sound, it's the design, the performance characteristics, the price you're looking for in an amplifier, and then you get whatever connectors you need to hook it up, basically.
Yeah.
That would be the way I go.
So yeah, I think that pretty much semi-explains the confusion. And just keep in mind that don't let anyone talk you into anything because it's balanced or not balanced.
Mhm.
It's more about, does the amplifier have enough power? Does it have the quality of sound that you're looking for the headphone you're plugging into it? That's really what you're shooting for. And then let the connections fall where they may.
Mhm.
That stuff, in the end, really, it's not crazy critical. Just go with what the manufacturer recommendations are, your dealer recommendations, people who in the know who have done this before. And by all means, you can contact us because we've kind of seen it all already. There isn't a lot of unknowns in this one anymore. So anyway, take care of yourselves, everybody. Thank you for watching us.